I may be a bog standard teacher and not a financial advisor, but as a mathematician, I get a little annoyed when I see the term average being misused. Some uses of average are fine. Most analysts agree that the teachers' pensions are better than average, and I'm not going to disagree with those. But it's the name itself that irritates me. Almost as much as when Michael Gove was reported as saying that everyone needed to be above average. That was another bit of misrepresentation. But the problem with the naming of our pension scheme is that everyone generally understands what is meant by the term average. And here is the thing. None of these measures of average are involved in our career average pension. There isn't a calculation performed on the salaries to get the average. There's no adding up of a salary and dividing. There is no finding the middle value. And there's no looking to see which salary you were paid most often. Those would be the proper mathematical references for the term average. No. Instead, we have what I call a little bit of linguistic fudging. We had a final salary scheme and we moved to a new scheme, and so it needed a new name. And it was decided that average was close enough, and more importantly, different enough from the old scheme to be able to tell the two apart. Now, I get that. The problem with this, though, is that it misleads people into thinking that they understand what an average is. And that can lead them into misunderstanding how to handle it. A lot of them try to protect their average, when actually that isn't necessary at all. Let me explain. The main concern I have when I talk to teachers is that they're worried that if they go on to take a drop in salary by going part-time, dropping a TLR, or even stepping back from a head teacher back into the classroom, that is going to have a massive impact on their pensions. Now, these things may have an impact on the other type of scheme, the final salary scheme, because that is based on the final salary. So dropping your salaries in the last years could have an impact. See other videos I've got on that aspect. But the impact on the career average scheme is not the same. It doesn't have anything like the same impact. And if you misunderstand this, you can end up doing the wrong thing and damaging your pension without realizing what's happening. For example, let's assume that a teacher is paid £2,280 in month one. Clearly, the average for that is going to be £2,280. And then, let's say in month two, they're paid a bit more. Now that means that the average is going to change. The average is going to switch up and it's going to become 2,565. And generally, people don't get worried about that part. Going up, the average is going up, and so nobody's going to get worried about it getting larger. But what happens if the opposite happens? What happens if they're going to be paid much less? And I'm going to be a little bit silly here, but I think it will help make the point later on if I do this. I'm going to say that somebody in month 3 gets paid just £57. Now that clearly is going to have a dramatic impact on the average. Of course it does, and this is where salary teachers get worried. They get worried. You see, I'm going to massively reduce my average. However, they shouldn't be worried because they need to ignore their concept of what is meant by average. The average is never actually used in working out your pension. It's completely irrelevant, and it's misleading to think that you need to be taking care of the average. You don't. It makes no difference. In fact, actually opting out and leaving it to try and protect your average makes things worse. Let me explain how the scheme actually works. Well, how did it work? Well, the scheme has an accrual rate of 1/57th, and this simply means that whatever you get paid, you divide it by 57, and that is what gets added to your pension figure. So if we're paid 2,280, we divide that by 57, gives us £40, and that £40 is placed into your pension pot. Now that is not £40 money, that's a promise to pay you £40 every year for life if you retire at your pension age. And here's the key thing, that £40 is locked in. It can never go down. It will go up with inflation, it will keep its buying power, but essentially it's locked in. It doesn't matter what happens next. That money is not going to be altered if you go up. So if you go up in the second month you go back to that 2,815, extra £570, means you're going to have an extra £10 added to your pot. And yes, we put in an extra 50 quid. And now we have the 40 and the 50. That 50 has no impact on the 40 that was in there already. Yes, you could look at that and say, well, the average is 45, but why do we need to? We don't need to. You've got a 40 and you've got a 50. They're what's promised to be paid to you when you come to retirement. Now let's go to that third month. That third month where my ridiculous figure, you're only going to get paid £57, turn up for a couple of hours. And that is only going to add £1. We divide it by 50, we're going to add £1 to the pot, and that gets locked in. Now, how much do we have in the pot? We have £91 in that pot. That's a promise to pay us in retirement £91 a year for life. Do we need to ever work out the average? No. All we need to know is that the pension we're promised is going to be £91. So what happens? Why do people get worried about it? Let's look at this over those 3 months, over that unusual set of 3 months. So we have £40 in the first month, our pension is at 40, we then add on 50, our pension's at 90, we then add 1, our pension's at 91. Never having to consider the average. No point has the average been worked out and calculated. But let's have a look at the average, because it's got the name in there. Let's say what it looks like when we look at the average. If we focus on the average, and why we're going to be misled if we do, in month 1, the average, 1 month, £40, is £40. Month 2, total of 90 over 2 months, well, you say £45. Then we come to the third month. £91 divided by 3, well, that's 30. The average has dropped like a stone. I mean, yes, I'm using silly examples here. But is that important? Somebody looking at that say, oh, if I do that job for £57 and my average is going to drop enormously. What does that actually mean? Well, I could opt out of that third month. Well, if you do, you're actually removing this pound. And your pension's only going to be worth £90. You'll still have worked 3 months. And therefore, if we say, well, what's your pension over those 3 months? You may not have added anything to it, but your average is now £30. Just by opting out doesn't change how you're protecting the average. You don't need to protect the average. What you're actually ending up with is £1 less. So the average is completely and utterly irrelevant in terms of working out what your pension is going to be worth. It's the total figure. How can we get the most in the pension? And that key figure is, it's the totals. At month 1, if you stay in, you've got £91. If you opted out because you think you've got to protect an average, you're going to end up with a worse pension. It's that simple. So whilst the name of the scheme includes the word average, it is a real misdirection about how we work out the figures. Staying in, even on a tiny, tiny salary, will make the pension better. I mean, in this case, not much, but £1 after all is £1. And that's not quite all. That's not quite all. Staying in makes it better because you're adding to the figure. But that's not the only reason for staying in. Can it get better than better? And yes, it can. I've already shown you that no matter what salary you're staying in the scheme, it always adds to the value. But it also gets better because whatever you have in the pension scheme is increased all the time by inflation. I mean, to be honest, that's actually nothing special because that happens whether you stay in or you leave the scheme. However, if you stay in, you don't just get inflation. You get an extra 1.6% if you're still in the scheme. And that 1.6% is compound interest. It goes on year after year after year. So staying in or rejoining the scheme without having had a break of more than 5 years, then your pension's going to get increased by an extra 1.6%. Well, what does that 1.6% mean then? Well, if we take a pension pot of £5,000 and you decided to opt out, then that's only going to increase by inflation. But if you stayed in, if you came back in and you did a few weeks on £57 and you add £1 to your pot, well, hey, the pot goes up from 5,000 to 5,001. But if that means you're still in the scheme when they do the 1.6% bonus, you're actually adding £80 without even considering inflation. We're adding another £80. So, yeah, £57. Yeah, great, you're being paid £57. It's only adding £1 to the pension pot. But the fact it keeps you in the scheme means you keep getting that 1.6% annual increase on top of inflation. And if you've got a big career average pension, and as we go further into careers now, people's pension pots, the career average element, is going to get bigger and bigger. So staying in is worth doing. I did mention about being out for more than 5 years. If you're out of the scheme for more than 5 years, then you will never get that 1.6% added to the old part of your pension, only for the future parts. So if you've been out for 4 years, it really might be worth considering getting back in as soon as possible, because you get all those 1.6%, including for the time you've been out, if you've been out for less than 5 years. So in summary, to sum up, no matter how big or small your salary is, paying into this career average pension can only make it get better. Forget the term average. It has no meaning, and it's going to lead you up the wrong path entirely. Staying in the scheme will make it better. That's simple. Although, if you also have final salary pension, then you might not be the case for that part. So if you've got final salary, do check out my other video. It's called The Pay Plateau, on how to protect your final salary. Unlike this career average, the final salary one can lose value. However, this career average can never lose value. You keep paying in, it just keeps getting better. And bear in mind that these same rules do not apply to the final salary scheme. For more on that, do go to my other videos and look for the one that's called The Pay Plateau. Thank you.